know what we're going to be doing in heaven is worshiping all the time.
You know who else was in conflict with the world because he loved the world? Jesus. It's unloving to everyone else to not take seriously whatever role God has given us.
And that's why we need Parrhesia. We need all the words. And we need to speak it boldly and clearly.
Welcome, Douglas Wilson, to our Parrhesian podcast. It's a modest operation, and I want to begin by thanking you. The world is getting to know you pretty well these days because of your increasing number of interviews online and on TV, cable news, and otherwise. And the fact that you would take time out of your schedule to speak with a couple of guys in Pittsburgh in a small operation like ours as we're entertaining the CREC is incredibly generous on your part. I think it's a testament to the kind of person that you are, and we're really grateful and want to welcome you and thank you.
Thank you happy to do it.
Yeah. So I reached out to you. I reached out to you a couple times. You've always responded very graciously. I reached out to you recently because our congregation, Beverly Heights Presbyterian Church, is currently in candidacy in the Bootser Presbytery of the CREC, Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. And we've been in that process since September, and we'll probably continue in candidacy through the rest of this year into September of, I guess it'll be September of 26. We've eclipsed the calendar year. So it'll be a one-year process for us with the expectation that our candidacy will be voted on at the meeting in September. The congregation will also have a vote, and so we're doing everything we can to inform our congregation about the CREC, bring them along. And we are coming from a unique place. I guess one of the questions I'd ask you, first of all, is if you've ever heard of anything quite like our situation, because we were once a PC USA congregation, so as mainline can be, although originally United Presbyterian got gobbled up into the merger in the 80s, PC USA for a lot of years, and then we left in 2007 and entered into the EPC for theological reasons, on principle, but really all we did was set the clock back about 20 years, and I just got an email I'm still on the EPC distribution list, a report that's an email that came out about a report on same-sex attraction as they're entertaining the possibility of ordaining same-sex attracted ministers. So, so we're getting out of the EPC, and if the CREC doesn't think we're too crazy or too problematic, we would really look forward to and love being a part of the CREC. But have you seen anything like that? Somebody coming from our side of things drifting towards where
Absolutely nothing like this. No.
Okay. Well, what do you think?
I think there have been things like this, perhaps with individuals coming from more liberal land and then becoming more conservative. But in terms of an entire church making that pilgrimage, I'm not aware of anything like this, no.
So what do you think our success rate or possibility will be in this endeavor?
Well, from what I know, I think the likelihood of success is strong. The one thing I would just say, not because I know anything about your situation, but just the setup, is that you all will have been used to being the most conservative people you know at Presbytery, and being the most liberal people you know at Presbytery might be disorienting.
We're going to have to check our conservative bona fides, because they're a little bit.
You're going to think that I'm just joining another Presbytery, and then you look around and see the Jolly Roger, and you think, well, this is the pirate Presbytery.
I'm going to bring my sidearm next time that I come to Presbytery meeting. So, well, we're really glad to be on the journey, and I think it's the right thing to do. It's not been something that's happened quickly. God has been working in our congregation over a long period of time. We've always been a socially conservative congregation. In the town that we're at used to be a bulwark of conservative Republican voting block in Pittsburgh. That has flipped entirely. Western Pennsylvania remains fairly conservative politically, socially, but Allegheny County, where we're located, and Mount Lebanon Township, which is in basically the center of Allegheny, is a big blue dot in a otherwise sea of red. And Beverly Heights is the sole. We're one of 5 Presbyterian churches in the township, and I think there are 19 houses of worship. We've got to be the only conservative one in the town, and so we're
one red dot inside a blue dot inside a red dot.
Yeah, it's very meta, but you can feel the pressure, certainly in this area. I mean, the rainbow flags are going to be coming out here in another month or so, and we are swimming against the tide. But we also see that as opportunity to take ground, to be distinct, to be the church where the church needs to be, because this place is a mess. Yeah. So we're really excited about the direction that we're going in. One of the things that you've been very kind in agreeing to talk with us about is there's a lot of information online about the CREC, and your name is often associated with that as a founder or the founder of the denomination. And some of that information is accurate. A lot of it is not. And the information that is not accurate is framed in such a way as I'll describe as scary. So there's the scary Doug Wilson that you can find online. Having had an opportunity to meet with you a few years ago, I was able to see firsthand that this man is not scary. He's the genuine article, very gracious, very kind, has been to us. And we wanted to give our congregation and anybody else who's interested in the CREC an opportunity to see that the caricature is in fact the caricature. But wanted to give you an opportunity to address some of the scary subjects that are out there for the benefit of folks who are thinking about the denomination.
That sounds like a great idea. And let me just say, preface this whole thing, this is not my first rodeo. I've been dealing with this for many years. You can't offend me by asking anything.
Okay.
Right.
Well, thank you.
I know I've heard it all, and I know that I'm not everybody's jam. I know that I'm an acquired taste for some. Some never acquire the taste. Some are just hostile intoleristas. But basically, I'm happy for you to say, what about this? What about that? Anything that your people may have heard that you would like to ask about, Liberty Hall, you can ask anything you want.
Well, let's start with how it is that you ended up in this place and how you've become so skilled in addressing it. I don't imagine that you started out your ministry 40, 50 years ago thinking that you would be a lightning rod. So how is it that that's what you've become in some ways?
Yeah, so after I found myself pastoring in 1977. And it was a small Jesus people operation, the same church. So I've been pastoring the same church since 77. And in 1977, for a number of years afterwards, the church was flourishing, growing, everybody's happy, no controversy. And that went on for years, maybe like 10 years. And I knew that Paul said in one of the pastorals, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. And I used to worry about that because everything was so placid. Life was good. Life was placid. And I'd wonder, are we doing anything wrong that everything is just so good, non-controversial? And then after probably in the neighborhood of a decade, it was as though someone gave a signal, and and all the controversies started to erupt, such that if you go on my blog, in the top menu bar under the About tab, there's a feature called Controversy Library. Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to drill deep on any of the things they've heard, the chances are pretty good that there's source documentation and responses to pretty much anything. So the late 80s probably was when the ripe vegetables and the dead cats started to fly. And it's been one thing or another. So it's not all been the same controversy, but it's been one thing or another where people have been trying to hamstring what's going on here.
Do you think that is that a function of strategy, or is this simply, you said something, the switch flipped, you were promoted in a sense, and this is just part of God's purposes and designs for your ministry, or do you actively seek out opportunities like this?
No, it's happened enough times that I now know generally if something is going to get a reaction, but that's not how it began. So some of this was, I was a conservative Arminian Evangelical Baptist when I first began preaching. And some of the paradigm shifts that I went through were the instigators of some of the first controversies. So in 1988, I became a Calvinist, for example. I became post-millennial in the mid-'80s somewhere, and that was mostly just fun. That was not a controversial thing. That was a fun thing. But Calvinism ruffled some feathers, and we had some people leave the church, and it was a doctrinal thing. And then in 93, when I became Paedo-Baptist, that was another doctrinal clash. And sometimes when you have a doctrinal clash, at some point personalities get involved, and it becomes more than just simply doctrinal. So I had some doctrinal differences with good brothers where fellowship was maintained, and then other doctrinal differences over Paedo-Baptism, for example, where fellowship was not maintained.
I want to pause and just say, Peter and Kyle, you guys can jump in whenever you want to. This is a dialogue, but I know I've got the list of questions here for asking. But
sounds good.
So the initial disruption, you might say, is theological, and that kind of led you into, you went Paedo-Baptist, but then you start thinking about and writing about covenant theology, and then
right.
how long was it before the whole federal vision item erupted? Because if you go online and you look at CREC or Doug Wilson, one of the accusations that is often made is this man's a heretic, and then they just attach FV after that as if to have made their case.
Yeah, FV, federal vision controversy erupted in 2002, and that was an interesting one where I and I think the friends with me were kind of blindsided by it. I was invited to speak at a conference in Auburn, in Monroe, Louisiana, at Auburn Avenue Presbyterian Church, and the name of the conference was Federal Vision, and federal is simply an older word for covenant. So it was a conference on covenant vision, and so the different speakers came and presented their talks, and then like 6 months later, the internet was still fairly young. We were test driving our controversy chops. So a gent named John Robbins attacked us for being, for being heretics, accusing us of denying sola fide, justification by faith, and a number of things like that, which was not true. I'm a five solas man. I'm a 5-point Calvinist. I'm a 5 solas man. Sola fide being the article of a standing or falling church, as Luther put it. But the accusation was made that we were denying these things. And it was because some of the vocabulary was unusual, and because of an emphasis that we were placing on the objectivity of the covenant. We were not denying the covenant. We were simply saying that the covenant has a visible aspect. The covenant, the visible church is involved in the covenant. It is not the case that the only entity in covenant union with Christ is the invisible church, and then the visible church is just all the church directories, No, the visible church is in covenant with Christ. It's the body of Christ.
Yeah. So this issue then, did it get taken up by other denominations that?
Oh,
wanted to-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It became it was an uproar. In fact, the first charge that was made against us is we were the speakers of this conference were basically excommunicated by a small microbrew Presbyterian denomination that none of us belonged to.
Okay.
All right. It was that kind of trial.
They did you a favor.
Trial by internet, and they concluded with "May God have mercy on their souls," and that sort of thing. And then it got picked up by the OPC, got picked up by the PCA, got picked up, where they would make statements denouncing the federal vision. Mm-hmm. And for example, the PCA had a bunch of points that they 9 or I forget how many, but it was out of the 9 or 10, however many there were. I agreed with 95% of them.
Mm-hmm.
Amen, 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 amen. And then on one of them, it would be a yeah, but. So the problem was that a lot of the denominational statements were shadowboxing. They weren't naming names. They were just fighting with this thing called federal vision. And so when Peter Leithart, who was one of the people associated with the federal vision, was actually eventually tried by the PCA, he was acquitted by the PCA. So the whole thing was sort of a scandalous mess. I was simply there were divisions or differences of opinion among the original speakers at that conference. It's not like it was a monolithic thing at all. But I called myself Federal Vision for a decade or more, trying to explain. Maybe if I explain one more time. And then I finally came to the conviction that all I was doing is persuading people that I was being dishonest. Because we know what Federal Vision is. And when you claim that you're not that. So I wrote a blog post called Federal Vision No Mas, where I didn't back away from any of the doctrines that I was espousing, but I said, I don't think Federal Vision is a good name for it.
We'll probably get to Christian nationalism in a little bit, but is it somewhat analogous to what I've heard you say in the past, that when that term becomes unusable or unworkable, you're happy to abandon that term?
Yes. I'm not married to terminology, and language is given to communicate. And as long as it's communicating, great. But as soon as it's a barrier to communication, find another way to say it.
Yeah. So we have where we're located is about 15, 20 minutes from the church where R.C. Sproul grew up at Pleasant Hills Presbyterian Church. Western Pennsylvania is very proud of the Presbyterians in this area, very proud of R.C. Sproul, and Ligonier is, about an hour or so away from where we're at. I was recently reading Stephen J. Nichols' biography on Sproul that came out several years ago, and there's a section towards the end where he stands up at the General Assembly to speak about federal vision, and he had some stout things to say there, but. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but I do think that I would, from where I stand, I would see you and R.C. Sproul as really brothers in the Lord and brothers theologically, not that far apart as some people would want to drive a wedge between you.
There's no wedge at all.
There's no wedge at all.
No wedge at all. Basically, I'm happy to be identified as someone who is basically where he is. I would have a difference with him on apologetics, for example. I'm Evangelical, he's classical apologetics, but on all the essentials of the Reformed faith, no difference at all.
Yeah, that would be my sense too. Peter, you did a lot of diving into federal vision before we move on from this, as we were all trying to get up to speed. Peter was our scribe on a lot of these things. Anything from federal vision that we haven't discussed?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot out there there's a lot of documentation online. Controversy Library has a lot of it. Also, I would just recommend go listen to, for folks on our podcast, go listen to Doug's examination. You got examined, right, by your own presbytery to answer these questions, if I remember right?
Right.
Yeah, that's, to me, when I was going through it, listening to that was the most helpful thing because it was systematic, it was quick, it was clear, and it clarified for everyone, oh, okay, we're just talking about Reformed theology here. That's all that's happening. So that's what I would say is go find that on Canon Plus. It's probably somewhere else also, I would imagine. That's the most helpful thing I would say.
Nate, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Doug, a really practical question. I mean, I know all the information for the doctrinal disputes is out there and you've addressed those. I'd be curious to hear, on the boots on the ground in the congregation, what have been some of the scaries that people in your congregation or others have expressed? Like, what's scary about federal vision?
Okay, that's an interesting question because in our local congregation, federal vision has been a non-issue. It's like the general demeanor of the people who have heard of it, and I think most haven't, or many haven't, but the people who've heard of it, their reaction is, what are they yelling about? What's this about? Because what they're experiencing in the sanctuary, in the pastoral day-to-day life of the church, is simply straightforward, up the middle Reformed theology. That's what they're experiencing. We're baptizing our babies. We teach. We have parents take vows to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We say that we emphasize the absolute necessity of the new birth. But this child who's baptized is part of the objective covenant. They have a responsibility to repent and believe. It's very evangelical, very Protestant, and so it's not scary at all locally, right? Someone could come from a historic Presbyterian church elsewhere, if they were blessed to never have heard about federal vision controversy and find themselves in our congregation, they would say, well, these people seem just like regular Reformed folks, probably a little more cheerful than some Reformed folks, but it's standard issue Reformed community life.
Thank you. You good? So let me ask this then, Doug. So you're developing personally as a pastor. Your theology is maturing. You're making some principal changes on theological topics like baptism, Arminianism, covenant theology, and then you decide at some point that you are Presbyterian and you need to be a part of a presbytery. Why didn't you join an established Presbyterian denomination? One of the accusations I've seen online is you started the CREC because no other denomination would have you, which maybe there's a little bit of truth to that. I don't know, but I asked this next question knowing that it impugns us as well. Are you really a Presbyterian church or denomination if you're outside of NAPARC? Now, the PCUSA was never in NAPARC. The EPC was never in NAPARC. The CREC is not in NAPARC. So are you really Presbyterian if you're outside of that, the real Presbyterians? And why not join an established denomination? Why did you start your own?
Okay, I would turn that last question around and say, are you really a Presbyterian unless you're divided from other Presbyterians?
That's a good point, right? That's proof.
Our bona fides are good.
Yeah.
There is a point. The people who said that we couldn't join an existing presbytery have a point, but it's not the point they think they're making. Okay, so and I have to tell you just a little. I'll collapse it, but a little autobiographical thing. I was a Baptist pastor. I inherited the church that had no statement of faith, no nothing, and I sort of built it out. I wrote the statement of faith, which was a Baptistic statement of faith. When I first realized that I was in trouble doctrinally on baptism. I notified I told the elders that I had the wobbles. I hadn't changed my mind, but I had read an article by Rob Rayburn on covenant succession. My father, whom I admire greatly, was a weird kind of Anabaptist, because what was he theologically? Well, he was whatever the text in front of him was at that moment. Mm-hmm. His aversion was systematics. He didn't want to do a systematic anything. So there are times he could sound like a Calvinist, sound like an Arminian, And so my father was the one who had taught me the doctrine of covenant succession, that Christian parents can trust God for the salvation of their kids, that we can expect them to walk with the Lord, that a pastor whose kids were away should recuse himself or step down because his family's not in order. My dad was very much that way. And Rob Rayburn wrote this article, and he was the first person other than my dad that I'd ever seen argue for covenant succession. But the thing that Rayburn did is that he connected it to baptism. Mm. And in effect, the way it hit me was, why don't you put your water where your mouth is? Mm. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're trusting God for your kids and you've surrendered, in a Baptistic setting, we dedicated all of our kids, it was basically a dry baptism. So right. we had dedicated our kids. We were confident that God was going to bless us in their faithfulness, which he has done, and our grandkids. The whole thing has been a great, great blessing. Now, what happened was I told the elders that I was in trouble, and there were 3 other elders at the time. Their initial response was very, very good. They said, well, let's study this together. We read books together on both sides. We worked through it. It was very good. And then a weird charismatic thing happened. And this was one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me, is one of the other elders, a staunch Baptist, also had a staunch conviction that the elders of a church ought to be in complete agreement on the statement of faith. Mm. And said, I was unsure. I couldn't affirm part of it. I wasn't denying part of it, but I was not there. And so he proposed that we take that part of the statement of faith out. And I told the other elders, you don't have to do that on my account. I'm the one possibly changing. I'm happy if I land as a Paedo-Baptist, I'm happy to roll over completely on the issue. I'm happy to never preach on it. I'm happy to never baptize a baby. I'm happy to just eat it, right? Mm-hmm. This is simply, my kids were already professing faith. It was not an immediate practical issue to me. And he said, no, we're not in agreement. We need to do that. So we voted at the time, in order to change the statement of faith, there had to be unanimous agreement among the elders. So we removed the Baptistic part of the statement of faith. Some time went by. I finally landed as a Paedo-Baptist. And then it dawned on everybody what had just happened. Because I became a Paedo-Baptist in a church that had no statement on it one way or the other. Mm. Right?
So and you had liberty to do what you wanted.
I had liberty to do what we wanted. And we couldn't put anything back in one way or the other without unanimity. Mm. Right? So it was, the elders basically painted themselves into a corner, which I think everybody realized after the fact. I don't think anybody was planning this. Well, that's when everything went south. And the elders basically went through the statement of faith and found some statements that sounded kind of Baptist-y, and dismissed me from my preaching role on the basis of that. We then had the mother of all household meetings, heads of household meetings, where the whole congregation came together. And it was really remarkable because the congregation, after I'd become a Calvinist, and this whole baptism thing came up because after I became a Calvinist in 88, I was preaching through Romans. I began preaching Calvinistically. We were the only church on the Palouse that was Reformed and Calvinist. And so Paedobaptists began grad students at the universities began coming, and so we had a handful of Paedobaptists in the church. And this whole thing was kicked off because one of them one couple had a baby, and they asked me to baptize it. And are you crazy? What do you? So that's why I had to start studying it. And all right. So then we had a contingent of Paedobaptists. We had a big group of Agnobaptists, people who didn't know what they thought. And then we had committed Baptists. That was the congregation, committed Baptists. But all of them, the Baptists, the Paedobaptists, and the Agnobaptists, all of them, with like a unanimous voice, told the elders, we do not want to split on this issue. Mm-hmm. And so basically the congregation told the elders, we don't care, work it out. Work something out. And it wasn't like we don't care what the Bible says, but they saw baptism as something to not divide over. And so the elder, basically what happened as a result of that was one of the other elders accepted the congregational charge. One of the elders resigned his office and left the church. And the other elder resigned his office and stayed in the church for about a year, good attitude and everything, but left out of conscience when we baptized the first baby. Now, what happened? Now, the congregation had said, work it out. And so we came up with a baptismal cooperation agreement, okay, where Baptists and Paedobaptists could serve together, including on the session, right? Mm-hmm. And what that did was disqualify us from joining any Presbyterian denomination. And I wasn't about to turn on the Baptists who had stuck with me during this controversy and say, sorry, you guys are out. I was, they'd stood by me, so I was going to stand by them. And that put us in a position where it's sort of the Groucho Marx view of country clubs, where he wouldn't join a country club that would have him.
Right. Yep.
if they would have me, then their standards are too low. And so that's, so to join the PCA, we would be bringing our downgrade with us.
Right.
Right. And because I'm a Paedobaptist, I think that the PCA, the OPC, should stick to their guns on this. They should be Presbyterian and Paedobaptist. And in the circumstances, we were a mix. And I think it was locally God-honoring for us to be the mix, but also for the PCA, OPC to stick to their guns and not be a mix. Mm-hmm. And so that put us in a pretty unique position. By this point, I was Presbyterian in my convictions with regard to church government. And so we formed the CREC with three churches, the Moscow Church, there was a church in Wenatchee and a church in Bellevue, Washington. And these were churches that had grown up out of people who had been ministered to here in Moscow Pullman while they were in college. And then they went back and they were sister congregations. And so those three churches founded the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. Presbyterian in government, but with latitude on the baptism issue.
So in some ways, ironically, it was charity. It was the act of charity that created a division, so to speak, with NAPARC because of your love for your brothers.
That's correct.
Okay. I didn't know that part of the story. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So you're not just trying to be weird and esoteric and on your own.
No.
There were actual people with real faces that you loved, that you're working in real time with, that you're wanting to continue to work with.
Correct. And there's no way that I could have led the church into the PCA, for example, without backstabbing some people.
Right. Okay. Have you ever thought about trying to lead, or maybe does that cooperation continue in the CREC with Paedobaptists and Credobaptists, which would prevent a union with another denomination?
Yes, it continues.
Okay.
And there are challenges with it. We haven't worked it out completely, but one of the statements that each CREC Church has to take into their documents the Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed, and the definition of Chalcedon. And then they have to adopt one of a range of approved Reformed confessional statements. One of them is the London Baptist Confession. Okay, now that means that in order for a church actually to come in under the London Baptist Confession, they will have to take some exceptions that would allow for Presbyterian church polity and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And they would have to take an exception that would allow them to receive paedobaptism. They wouldn't have to administer paedobaptism, but they'd have to receive it. Things like that, they would have to bend. But right. that is in the constitutional framework of the CREC.
This is a little bit of inside baseball for pastors and elders, perhaps, but from our side of things, having been in the PCUSA, one of the great problems that we observed in the PCUSA was the Book of Confessions and the plurality of confessions, which allowed for no actual definition. And then they brought in the Confession of 67, which allowed all kinds of nonsense to enter into the denomination. And it was the pluralism at the confessional level that started to erode or helped to erode a lot of the theological distinctions. So when we left the PCUSA and we entered into the EPC and there was one sole confession, the Westminster Confession, that was really encouraging to us. And I've had to do a lot of thinking and working and thinking about going back to a denomination that has a plurality of confessions, because I have in the back of my mind, does this seed or salt in pluralism at a confessional level that is working on the conscience of people that might allow for things to bloom and blossom out of control?
And the answer to that is, given the sinful heart of man, yes, it could.
Yeah.
It certainly could go south that way, but it could also be, and what we're laboring to have it be, is a demonstration of a real ecumenical spirit among evangelical believers. Mm-hmm. So we say, if you have two churches, one's a London Baptist and one's Westminster Confession, we say in the Constitution that differences that arise because of the differences of confessions cannot be adjudicated up the chain.
Okay.
So this church can do what they do, and this church can do what they do, and we've got to work out paedocommunion. If some people from one church transfer to another, how do you handle that? Right. There are things that we are still working on, but basically, I think we have some pretty decent guardrails to keep it from going into a liberal, goopy thing.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to education unless you guys have anything left relative to the denomination. So in addition to helping to establish the CREC, you've been a prime mover and shaker in classical Christian education. You've been very strong in your advocacy for that. You've voiced that throughout your career and ministry. One of the things that I think will go right to the heart of our congregation, so it's a scary, not just for Beverly Heights, or not just for other churches, but for Beverly Heights specifically. We live in a township that has a school district that is a top 5 school district in the state. So Mount Lebanon School District is ranked in the top. What's ranked in the top 10, I believe it's in the top 5. But in the surrounding communities, we have 4 top 10 school districts in the state. So there's Mount Lebanon, there's Upper St. Clair, there's Peters Township, Bethel Park. These are all school districts that are ranked top 10 in the entire state. So we have a concentration of what is considered to be excellent public education in our communities. And a couple of years ago, we started a small school in our church. All of our kids, from the 3 of us, all attend that school. It was something that the Lord kickstarted as a result of COVID, building out of our preschool into we're K through 8 as well, preschool and now K through 8. We have to fight and claw for every inch of growth there and development. And one of the things that's going to be scary and already is presenting itself as kind of scary is the memorial on Christian education. We pay through the nose on taxes here in Mount Lebanon Township, And the idea that we're encouraging people to pull their kids out of a top 10 school or a top 5 school, pay on top of their taxes to send their kids to a private school that may or may not have the level of excellence that we've been told we get, people look at us like we've got 3 heads. So why have you been so strong on Christian education for so long? I mean, from what I can tell, you haven't wavered on this from the time that your kids were born. You started thinking about this from other interviews that I've seen you do. You've been pretty unmovable on this. And why should a church make that a position or a hill to die on?
Yes, there are layers to this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me walk in from the shallow end. The first is there is nothing in the Bible that says it is a sin to have your kids in a tax-supported government school. Okay,
right. Yeah.
The issue for me and the issue for us is secular education, not tax-supported education. Whether the education is tax-supported or not, whether it's a government school or not, is a separate debate.
Okay.
But that's a political debate, not a worldview debate. All right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we believe that Christian parents have the responsibility to bring up their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. All Christian kids should receive a Christian education. Now, if someone said, Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz here are both highly educated, they're independently wealthy, they've got a great government school that their kids go to, the parents debrief the children every day after school, and then have extra lessons that balance out what the kids learned. They have the teachers of their kids over for dinner regularly. They are on it. Right. Mm-hmm. And someone were to say, do you believe that it's possible for parents like that to fulfill Paul's requirement, Ephesians 6:1-4, doing it that way? The answer is yes. I believe that there are people who can do that. Now, having said that, I think that 2 years into it, they will come to the conclusion that they could, with half the effort they're expending, plant a Christian school.
Right. Yeah.
Right. In other words, that kind of activity would be just a time suck. It would be all kinds of energy would have to be put into it. But the issue is, in my mind, are the kids receiving a Christian education? As opposed to the idea that knowledge is neutral and we can just let them go there, and it's a school with high standards. We can just put them on the bus and forget about it. Well, yeah, the schools have got high standards, but my question is, what standards? By what standards? What you're doing when you're saying these are the top schools in the state, they're the top schools in the state according to a particular metric, which we might agree with when it comes to academics, right? Or orderliness in the halls, academics, that sort of thing. But all of the classes are taught as though God's existence were not relevant to what they're learning in that classroom. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that said, I was just looking here. I wanted to find the memorial on education to make sure that I was touching all the. Never mind.
Peter will find it. Pull it up, Peter. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So the next thing is, I grant that if you look at the government schools in the United States, the top 10, if we're just talking academics, the top 10% of our students in American public schools are competitive with other kids anywhere in the world, head to head, we can run with them. Our school system is a basket case when it comes to the lower 90%.
Yeah.
Right. But in highly educated communities where the schools are supported, the parents both have graduate degrees, and the kids are the kind of kids who could teach themselves phonics off of the back of a cereal box in the morning. These kids are going to do very well academically. Mm-hmm. Okay. But what we're after is a worldview education. We want our kids to love and serve God in every human endeavor, and that includes the life of the mind. If we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, all our brains, and strength, then if adults have to do that, then kids need to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've said, basically, Christian education is the way. Homeschooling, that's up to you. Co-op, that's up to you. Brick and mortar Christian school, that's up to you. And even a government school with parents hovering over it with 20 hours a week extra work, making sure that the kids are getting a Christian perspective, that's up to you. But we're going to have pastoral concerns about that latter category because it generally doesn't go that well.
One of the things that it's ironic and interesting about our case is that we've got these top 5, top 10 schools, and in Mount Lebanon a year ago or so, we had a federal court case that took place, went up the chain, and Wall Street Journal had it on the front page of the paper because we had a first grade teacher who was grooming the students in LGBTQ stuff, and without any knowledge of the parents had no knowledge of what was going on. So this went all the way up to the federal courts, made national news. We had another national news story break just a few months ago at Peters Township about a Epstein-style sex ring that took place, 300 federal counts of all kinds of mischief that was going on in the school. Bethel Park produced the would-be assassin that tried to shoot Trump just a couple years ago. He was a student at Bethel Park. So it's not like we're producing the best and the brightest in these school districts, and yet there is this idea that the public school is just a part of the fabric of life. And by the way, we're just paying so much for it. Why wouldn't we take advantage of it? Or why it would be almost. Maybe some think that it's irresponsible not to do it because of how much they're having to pay to be in the district.
It is an affliction. Yeah, half of my property taxes go to the government school system. It is a burden. It is an affliction. But you don't want a form of education that is where you wind up with very clever lesbians.
Can we clip that one? We're going to clip that one.
That'll be a 5 second short.
Right.
Do you want to clip it to save it or clip it out?
No, we're going to save it and promote it. That's going to be the thumbnail. Peter, you pulled up the memorial? You just want to read it real quick?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. It says, God has explicitly commanded parents to bring up their children in the education and admonition of the Lord, Ephesians 6:4. Given the impossibility of neutrality in education, we do heartily affirm the necessity of educating our children in a manner that is explicitly Christian in content and rigor. While parents who do not fully understand the indispensability of Christian education should be warmly received into membership, we nevertheless encourage Christian parents to seek alternatives to the government school system. In cases where Christian education is an impossibility, parents must be active and diligent in overseeing the education of their children.
Yeah, so for example, in our church, we have hundreds of school-aged children, and 98% of them are receiving a private Christian education. Occasionally, we have, for example, as a result of a nasty divorce and a court case, court-ordered kids must be in the government schools. We have situations like that. Or someone new to the area moves into the church and their kids are just in the government school. We don't have a rule that you can't become a member unless you have your kid enrolled at Logos or whatever. What the memorial describes is they're warmly received into membership, but there is just a cultural expectation that we want parents actively engaged in what goes into their kids' heads.
Right.
And when it becomes, let's say you've got a wife with a quadriplegic husband and 3 kids, and she's got to work, and this goes with baptism. Every time we baptize an infant, the congregation takes a vow. Do you promise to assist these parents in the Christian nurture of this child? And that includes, we have a Christian education fund. We don't want any child in the church to miss out on a Christian education because of money. Right? So we lend a helping hand on homeschool materials, on tuition for schools if parents are struggling. So we don't just put the law on people. This really is a warm, let's do this together, and not a condemnation. Now, there's one other thing I should hasten to add here. This memorial says nothing about parishioners in your church teaching in a government school.
Right.
Okay. Our concern about kids in a second grader in a government school is the second grader doesn't really have the equipment to know what's being done to him. Right. But an adult Christian who's in the government school system can have a Christian worldview, can understand what's going on, can understand how to set up firewalls, and et cetera. So we have a guy in our church, a member in good standing, who teaches at the high school, the local high school here. He's not under any kind of dark cloud. He's not a second-class citizen. So we do not give the stink eye to people who work for the school system or who teach there.
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear and to state clearly, because our clerk of session is a middle school teacher for one of the schools in the area, Upper St. Clair, and he's our clerk and he's a great elder. Yeah. Sends his kids to our school, but he's working there, and that's not. And we've had the conversation. You're equipped for this. Your children are not. That's really the dividing line. That's the distinction.
Exactly.
Kyle, you're heading up our education ministry here. Anything on education before we move on to the next scary subject?
Yeah, I see our list here. Thanks for all that, Doug. I mean, I suppose my question would be, in my experience with Christian education, parents often think about curriculum and content, and to just keep with the alliteration. I have found that parents aren't really thinking about the character of the teachers or the culture of the school. And I think you've intimated a little bit about what happens in the hallway and these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. What would be some key features that you have found in the past, like as you were founding Logos School, like were you thinking about the culture, the character of the teacher? Like what were some of those things that parents typically overlook in a Christian education and say, well, the content is important, but all of these other things aren't much of a big deal?
I would just make 2 comments. In Luke 6, I think it is, Jesus says the one who is taught becomes like his teacher. So a lot of education has to do with the students emulating the character of the teacher. And I want my kids' teachers to fear God for that reason, because the one taught grows up into the character of the one teaching. With regard to culture, this is a big deal because even in Christian schools, the surrounding youth culture, whether you're talking about social media, AI, chatbots, music, Spotify, Rodify, all of the things. That's like a dense fog that's pressing up against your Christian school, right? right? Wanting to seep into the cracks and everything. And at Logos School, we have to sweat blood to keep the Christian culture from getting contaminated by the surrounding debaucheries. And the government schools are not in a position to inculcate the kind of cultural expectations that we would want our students to have. So your kid's going through the high school. How many of his friends are sleeping with each other? Right. How many of them know how to get condoms from the school nurse? How many of, and the issue is not whether your kid will do that. Right. The issue is whether they will think of that in the way that you would want them to. There's certain things that are going on in our culture around us that ought to shock us, but don't shock us anymore. We don't do them, we don't approve of them, but neither are we shocked by them. And that's one of the issues. That's a cultural issue.
Great, thank you.
So let me move us on to the next big scary, I think, that a lot of folks would be interested in. You go online, and one of the caricatures that you can find out there is that Doug Wilson hates women. He's a misogynist. He's a chauvinist. He pushes them down stairwells every chance he gets.
That's right.
Yeah. What is your assessment of that? And what is it? If someone were to say, what do you have against women's rights? Why do you want to take away the vote to women, for suffrage? And why can't a woman, sing on the chancel or the stage and participate in a worship service? Or you just seem very buttoned up when it comes to the role that women have in culture and in the church. Why don't you like women?
Yeah. So let me start with the 19th Amendment one, because that's gotten traction recently.
Right.
That is not an XXXY chromosome thing at all. I'm a conservative, which means that I believe that the basic building block of every human society is not the individual. I'm not a libertarian. It's the family. It's the household, right? So in our church polity, I'm not on the warpath trying to get the 19th Amendment repealed. That's the sort of thing that I would like the world to watch the church for 200 years and see how wonderfully it's going in the church and say, hey, why don't we do that? But what we do in our church elections is that we vote by household. We have membership. The membership is individual, but our governmental structure is household by household. And that means when we vote for, we're not congregational. We don't vote on every last thing. We're Presbyterian. So the church is ruled by the session of elders, but the congregation does vote on the election of deacons, on the election of elders, and on the calling of a minister. Mm-hmm. Okay. And when we put a men on the ballot to the congregation, I'd estimate maybe 10% or so of the votes cast are cast by women, because in Acts 16, Lydia was baptized and her household. So mm-hmm. There are circumstances where women are the heads of their households. Either they're single, grown out of their father's house, and they have a job and own their house. They're a household of one, or they're widowed, or they're divorced. You have, and in our church elections, these women vote, and these women attend our heads of household meetings. So it's the reason women don't vote as women in our church is the same reason that men don't vote as men in our church. The men vote as heads of households, or as single men who are a household of one, just like the women. Right. So the libertarian ideal, which goes back to social contract theory, regards the basic unit of society to be the individual.
Right.
All right. And that means that we have drifted into an atomistic polity where you take a big sack and fill the sack up with BBs, and each BB is an individual. And so what you've got is a big beanbag chair. You can push it in here and push it in there. And then with pot dispensaries everywhere and pornography everywhere, we pour in a quart of car oil, 1040 oil, and grease the BBs. Mm-hmm. And everything is slippery and malleable. What I'm after is I want us to, in prototype, be building out a molecular social order, a molecular society, where families and guilds and friend groups and clubs form complex molecules. And the way you get there is you have the church recognize the molecule, right? Where the molecule has a political significance. And I would love for that to be again the case in our civil polity, but we have a long way to go. And I think we need to test drive it and model it in the church. So that's the first thing. It's not a matter of denying women a say. It is making sure that we grant households a say. That's how I would explain that. Now on the women helping to lead in the worship. So the church is feminine.
Right.
The church is the bride of Christ. And one of the things that the feminine bride of Christ needs to do in order to be submissive and to continue to preserve her femininity is to do what her bridegroom tells her. Okay? Right. Mm-hmm. And what our bridegroom tells us in Scripture is that worship is to be led by the men. Okay, I don't permit 1 Timothy 2:12. Women are prohibited from usurping authority over men, teaching or instructing men. Women are not prohibited from having conversations with men. In Acts, Priscilla and Aquila take Apollos aside in the driveway of the church there, and they set him straight. The verb is very clear. Both Priscilla and Aquila are talking to Apollos and instructing him in the way more fully. So the prohibition of women formally teaching in the church is not a statement that no man can ever learn from a woman. If Nancy and I are doing our Bible reading in the morning together, and Nancy says, Doug, have you ever noticed that this happens and this? Let's say I had never noticed that. I'm not required to go, oh, no.
I can't hear that from you.
Oh, say, can you see? You know,
Right.
it's not a requirement that no man ever learn from a woman. It's that the woman not set herself up as though she were a teaching officer of the church.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And so I don't have a problem with the woman playing the piano. I don't have a problem with women contributing, but I do have a problem with women either preaching, which is a direct violation, or looking like they're angling to stand right next to preaching.
Right.
You know, okay, the next step. What's the next step? She's doing the scripture reading, or she's helping to distribute the communion elements. Is she knocking on the door of eldership, or is the church inviting her to look like she is? I think that we need, in a feminist egalitarian era, we need to be a submissive, dutiful wife as the bride of Christ. Now there are other. Let me go into something you didn't ask about directly, and that is just view of women generally. Mm-hmm. We started Logos School. I've got one son, two daughters, and we provided them all with the same rigorous education. And my wife has written 8 or 9 books, including a textbook of English grammar. She's written a textbook and then a number of books for Christian women. She's written 8 or 9 books. One daughter has written like 5 books, and my other daughter has written 2 books, I think, and edited a multi-volume set of English literature textbooks. So I would just simply say that if I'm a misogynist, I'm very, very bad at it.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing where my daughters, my wife, are very much looked up to in our congregation, and are women that a number of other women emulate. If you did a poll, as some of our ladies did a few years ago, we have a lot of women in our congregation who are educated, graduate degrees, accomplished, and so the issue is not do I think that women have a brain? That's not the issue at all. The issue is, do I think that godly women have enough of a brain to read the Bible and to see what it says about role relationships?
Right.
And when men assume their primary duty of provision and protection, and women assume their duty of being what the Apostle Paul calls the oikodespotes, the house despot, right? The executive of the home. And as it says in Proverbs, the husband safely trusts his wife. She's the executive. She's the manager of the home. When you have that kind of defined role relationship, biblically defined, where the husband respects his wife's position, the wife respects the husband's position, it really is harmonious, complementary. It's not it's not the land of Gilead where the women all have to wear red dresses.
So the PCA is flirting with women leadership. I saw for a brief second there was something on the OPC website about women deacons. The EPC built the entire denomination on a compromise on this issue, and the PC USA gave up on this a long time ago. Why does it seem as though every Presbyterian denomination flirts with this, and eventually succumbs to it, or it looks like they're going to succumb to it? They're certainly flirting with it. And what confidence that you have that the CREC won't flip flop on this issue? Yeah.
I think that our memorials and the men that have founded the CREC are a great safeguard for the present. But like I said to an earlier question, it's a fallen world. And what do you have to do to have a garden with weeds in it? Well, nothing. You don't have to do anything. You're going to grow weeds, and somebody's going to start doing something, and you hope and pray that there will be faithful men who resist it. I think the vulnerability of Presbyterians to this sort of thing is, ironically, the fact that Presbyterians value an educated ministry, and consequently, a lot of ministers and leaders have gone through the academy, have gotten graduate degrees, and not just the MDiv from seminary, but also a doctorate or a master's or whatever from the academy. And there are a lot of cooties there. And there's sort of the old joke about the liberal and the evangelical talking. And the evangelical says to the liberal, "I'll call you a Christian if you'll call me a scholar."
Right. I told you that joke when I saw you in Moscow a couple years ago. We laughed over that at dinner. It's funny because it's true. Yeah. So it's an issue of respectability and erudition that's causing the temptation.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. What the Presbyterians want a seat at the cool kids table, and the cool kids currently are egalitarian.
You guys have anything on this before I move on to the next one? So, and this may be, with our time limits, this might be our last major topic, but I want to get into the issue of cultural engagement, which is a feature of the CREC and a feature of your ministry in general. There would be some who would accuse you or identify you as a culture warrior. There are some who may go farther than that and say that you're just a brave heart with war paint and ready to pick any fight that you can. How do you see yourself with relationship to the culture? Why do you engage with culture and use language that is engaging, even provocative sometimes? Why not just be really winsome and enjoyable and smiley, and inviting? Why have any angularity? Why go to war with the culture at all?
Okay, so this is a fun topic. There are many avenues to pursue. I'll try and stay on the main road. The first thing is the winsomeness mandate. Thou shalt be winsome.
Yeah.
Is a major turnoff to many Christians. The problem with winsomeness is that it isn't. Right? The winsomeness vibe is genuinely winsome to a certain kind of person, right? And so if you've got a Mr. Rogers approach to everything, you're going to find people flocking to you, but the people who flock to you are going to be a certain sort of person. You're going to catch the kind of fish that you're putting the bait out for. Mm-hmm. All right. One of the things that, and when I see someone doing the winsome, the winsomeness jag or the winsomeness shuffle, it makes me want to go, oh. It's not winsome at all. It's a golly, who let that person out? And the what I call our winsome tartness, satire, what Kevin DeYoung called the Moscow mood,
right?
The cultural engagement where we want to fight, but we want to fight like cavaliers and not like thugs, mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. I want to fight like D'Artagnan and not like Bruno. So
you do have rules of engagement then.
Absolutely, there are rules of engagement, mm-hmm. And I wrote a book on this called A Serrated Edge, and there's a new edition coming out, and in the appendix of the new edition is a summary of those rules of engagement. Like, mm-hmm. What are the principles for a godly satirist? And basically, if people think that I just am sarcastic all the time because I can't help it, I'm not only fighting with the infidel online, but I'm also regularly involved in road rage incidents, and I consistently get bad service in restaurants and am in quarrels with the wait staff. That would be me with this sarcastic bet with no off switch. I don't know how to turn it off. And if you have a satirist whose wife and kids flinch every time he comes in the room, then he's doing it wrong. He's not qualified. Satire, the winsome tartness, the engagement, that sort of thing, is a tool or a weapon to be picked up when appropriate, utilized, and then put back. Mm-hmm. It's not to be a personality defect where you're stuck on stupid and you have to do that. So then the next thing I'd point to, and this is, I tell people that I write for the same reason that dogs bark. I love writing. I need to write. I love writing. But the upshot of it is that I've written over 100 books. And you might say someone needs to stage an intervention. That's what I do. But if you look at the titles of the books, I've written a commentary on all of Paul's epistles. I've written a number of books on education. I've written a number of books, over 20, I think, on marriage and family relationships, personal dynamics. I've written maybe 5 that could be counted as satires or defenses of satire. Maybe 1 or 2 more than that. So my novels are satiric, and then I've written 2 defenses of that kind of thing. But it is not the preponderance of what comes out of my keyboard. It just isn't.
I'm curious, the appendix that's in the new edition of Serrated Edge, was that born out of the engagement you had with John Frame on some of these things?
Yes, correct. That is the thing that we included. Yes.
I raised that particular point because John Frame is the son of this congregation. He grew up at Beverly Heights Church.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, he did. And he came back a number of years ago for part of a celebration, but I have a picture of him as a teenage boy playing the choir or playing the organ in our sanctuary. And so we proudly claim him as a son of the congregation.
Oh, very good.
And from my understanding, that exchange with him was fairly warm, and you appreciated some of the things that he had to share with you.
Very, very much so. I've appreciated Frame very, very much over the years.
Yeah. What about you guys? Before we wrap it up, anything on cultural engagement, culture warrior, CREC being the wedge that's blowing through culture? What do you think,
Doug? I do have a question about online interaction. I like to say that there's niceness and then there's kindness, and only one of them is a fruit of the Spirit.
Right. Yeah.
What do you say to those who would claim or assert that you're unkind online and that you're actually not standing up for the truth, but you're dividing the unity of the church?
Right.
Where would you start? What would you say?
So I would say the first thing is when someone comes to me and makes an appointment and sits down with me, which has happened more than once, to say that I think that what you're doing is unbiblical. Okay. Now there's the first reaction, and then there's the second reaction. I think my responsibility in the first reaction is to hear what they have to say, repeat it back to them, ask for particular instances of what they're talking about. Was it when I responded to so-and-so, or was it the time where I responded to Nadia Bowles-Weber? What are you talking about? And then repeat it back to them so that they know that they were heard, and then commit to them that I will think and pray about it. Okay, I'll take it on board, and then get back to them. If I've just finished writing an article defending myself on whatever it is, I don't think it's appropriate for me to print off the article for them and say, here. I think I need to take a beat and listen, and then genuinely take it to the Lord, genuinely pray about it. Because if someone got up the nerve to come talk to me, then I want to be able to listen to whatever it was that God might have for me in that. So let's say I've done that, and we've gotten to the point where we're having our second conversation, and he still thinks what he thinks, and I'm unpersuaded by what he said. He says, I think what you're doing is unbiblical, I would say, oh, all right, that's a fair cop. Let's have a Bible study. Okay. Does Amos use satire? Yeah, the whole book is satire. Does Jesus dismantle the Pharisees in Matthew 23? Yeah, there's a whole chapter full of invective. Woe to you, bag of snakes, seminary grads. Who told you weren't going to hell? Golly, Jesus was, as I've said recently in an interview, that Jesus was one of the most impolite people ever. He was kind, but frequently not nice. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the distinction that you made there at the beginning between kind and nice, it is a good one when going to what does the Bible condemn? The Bible does condemn unkindness, right? But confronting sin boldly is not. It may be a surgeon's scalpel, it may be a mugger's dagger, and it might be a surgeon's scalpel. Both of them are sharp. Mm-hmm. All right, so we have to evaluate, according to scriptural standard. Then frequently someone will grant the point, okay, yeah, this is in the Bible, this is in the Bible, okay, but I think what you're doing is counterproductive. You're turning people away. You're dividing the church. You're turning people away. And I'd say, well, I don't see it because our congregation has done nothing but grow. Our church is flourishing. Now, growth by itself is not an automatic justification because cancer grows and morning glory grows. But if the charge is you're shrinking, then it is an appropriate answer to say, no, we're growing. All right. So you're not being winsome. You're turning people off. And I say, well, a lot of people are attracted to what we're doing because they can count on what's coming out of our mouths being what we actually think. Right? So we've not found it to be counterproductive at all. And the next thing, this is an important thing, I think, for you all. I believe that my personality, my particular gifts, the way I write, all of that is from the Lord, and I think it's fine. But that does not mean that I think everybody else has to be a clone or a knockoff of me. So joining the CREC does not mean that every elder in the church has to become a practitioner of polemical satire. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that. It'd be appalling if that did happen. Mm-hmm. But what they do have to do, what does have to happen, is they have to be good with it happening in their among their associations. So when you join the symphony orchestra, you don't have to start playing the French horn, but you have to be okay with the French horn being there.
Right.
Right. You play the timpani, you play the piccolo, you play you're the first violin. You don't have to be what that guy is being, but you have to be okay with him being there. And that's basically what it would be. That's what it would be for Beverly Heights. It wouldn't. You wouldn't have to become the lightning rod of Pennsylvania, where you're starting battles with everybody there. Now, you might find yourself in a battle, as you have, as you were. Mm-hmm. Or you might find yourself in another one again. No matter how nice you are,
right, or
how kind you are, the people. The Intolerista left. What kind of people do they go after? Jack Phillips in Colorado, the cake baker, Barronelle Stutzman, the florist. Most evangelicals are so sweet that diabetics can't be friends with them, and yet the hard left savages them, goes after them. So the issue is not. Wilson, you're being insufficiently sweet, because I see people who are sweeter than anything that get the treatment. So that's it's not the disparity of sweetness that is causing this. It's the fact that Jack Phillips and I are both opposed to the sexual revolution, and I'm articulating it in one way, he's articulating it in another, and they go after the way he articulates it through cake baking, and they go after the way I articulate it, which would be the verbal tools that I use.
So you have personally, and the denomination's been punching right for a long time, and when you do that, you meet resistance. How do you keep from just getting tired and worn out and despondent? How do you keep your cheer and still put your head down and run into a brick wall day after day after day? How do you do that?
So some of it is personality, admittedly, but a lot of it, I think, is postmillennialism. We have an optimistic eschatology. We believe that Christ's kingdom on earth is going to grow and spread and fill the earth, and the earth is going to be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So we might be in a losing battle, but we are in a winning war. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we can trust God for the outcome. And God has been extraordinarily kind to us in lots of ways. And, the first big round of, that I had to go through there was some treachery and betrayal. It was really, really hard. Mm-hmm. But looking back on it, so I would describe one of the worst things that ever happened to me. When I look back on it, I would call that one of the best things that ever happened to me. One of the great gifts that, and it was the baptism controversy when I became Paedo Baptist, because I told the elders, I'm willing to never baptize a kid. I'm willing to roll over. I'm willing to never teach on it. And because one of the other elders went south and just went crazy, he did more in 10 minutes to establish the church on a reformed sacramental footing than I would have done in 10 years, than I would have done in 100 years. And it was gut-wrenching at the time, but looking back on it, I say, whoa, wow, look at that. Look what God did. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask this as a final question then, Doug, and I thank you again for your charity of time and your kindness and your love for us and the work that you're doing in the church. We're midstream in this process. We're in candidacy. We've got about 5-6 months left. What advice would you have for us as pastors and leaders in the church, or for us as a congregation as we're on the back half of this discernment process? And any words of counsel?
Yeah, the one word of counsel that I would say is the thing that I said at the beginning of this session, where you tell your parishioners, Liberty Hall, no question, is off the table.
Yeah.
All right. You're not going to hurt our feelings. You're not going to hurt the CREC's feelings. You're not going to hurt Doug Wilson's feelings by raising whatever question it is, and just basically say, this is, we're not going to do any skullduggery in the middle of the night. We'd like to walk into the CREC in the middle of the day with our heads up and everybody knowing everything.
Right. Yep. Great. I really appreciate it, Doug. You've been tremendous. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you at council, I guess, in September in Tennessee, I think it is.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll be able to shake your hand as fellow members. We're praying for that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Thanks so much.